Most people move through life believing that everything they do is quietly defining who they are. Every conversation becomes a reflection of their worth. Every decision becomes evidence of their intelligence. Every success becomes proof that they are enough. Every mistake becomes something that must somehow be explained. Without realizing it, life slowly becomes a performance. Not because anyone is pretending, but because every action feels connected to maintaining an identity. The mind is rarely asking only, what needs to happen here? It is asking something much more personal. What does this say about me? Will they think I'm capable? Will they think I'm kind? Will they think I'm successful? Did I say the right thing? Did I make the right impression? Even beautiful moments become opportunities for evaluation. A conversation is replayed long after it has ended. A compliment is analyzed. A criticism lingers for days. The body remains subtly vigilant, always trying to protect the person it believes itself to be. And because expression is carrying an identity, it begins to feel surprisingly heavy. Speaking requires management, creating requires confidence, leading requires certainty, loving requires reassurance. Every moment asks the nervous system to carry not only the action itself, but the invisible weight of someone who believes they must be maintained. Perhaps this feels so normal that it has never even been questioned. And yet the exhaustion so many people feel is not always coming from what they are doing. Sometimes it comes from constantly carrying the one they believe is doing it. This habit did not appear by accident. It was not a flaw in your character. It was how the nervous system learned to organize life. From childhood, identity served an important function. It created continuity where there was constant change. It organized memory into a story. It gave experience a center. It answered the question, who am I? Without that center, the mind felt uncertain, so it began constructing one. Every experience became part of the narrative. Every achievement strengthened it. Every failure challenged it. Every opinion either confirmed or threatened the person you believed yourself to be. Over time, identity became far more than an idea. It became a strategy for safety. The nervous system quietly learned that remaining psychologically consistent meant remaining secure. If others approved, the identity felt stable. If they criticized, ignored, or rejected it, the body often responded as though something much deeper than an opinion had been placed at risk. This is why even simple moments can carry surprising tension. You hesitate before speaking. You rehearse what you are going to say. You replay conversations after they have ended. You wonder whether people understood you correctly. You try to anticipate how your words will be received before they are even spoken. None of this usually feels deliberate. It feels responsible. It feels intelligent. It feels like the normal way to move through life. But gradually something subtle changes. Expression is no longer allowed to arise naturally. It becomes managed. Words are chosen not simply because they are true, but because they protect an image. Actions are selected not only because they are appropriate, but because they preserve a sense of self. Even creativity can quietly become an act of self-maintenance. Instead of allowing something new to emerge, the mind asks, will people like this? Does this fit who I am? Will this strengthen how I am seen? The body remains in a state of subtle contraction because every moment feels personally significant. Nothing is simply happening. Everything is happening to someone. So the mind edits, it filters, it compares, it protects, it holds back certain expressions while pushing others forward. Not because life requires it, but because identity believes its survival depends upon it. This is where so much invisible effort comes from. Not the effort of living, the effort of constantly carrying the one who believes they are living. And the more important that identity becomes, the less freely life can move. Expression loses its spontaneity. Silence becomes uncomfortable. Action becomes calculated. The simple intelligence of the present moment is replaced by the ongoing task of maintaining a psychological owner. The great paradox is that nothing has gone wrong. Identity once served its purpose. It helped organize experience while consciousness matured. But there comes a point where the very structure that once created stability begins to restrict the natural movement of life itself. What once protected expression slowly becomes the thing that prevents it. As awakening continues to mature, something remarkable begins to happen, not because you are trying to change, not because you have perfected yourself, but because the quiet assumption that there is someone inside directing every movement begins to soften. At first, the change is almost impossible to notice. You still speak, you still make decisions, you still create, you still work, you still love. From the outside, very little appears different. But internally, something fundamental has disappeared. The constant feeling of authorship begins to dissolve. Words still arise, yet there is no sense of "I am creating these words." Action still unfolds, yet there is no inner figure claiming ownership of what is happening. Creativity continues to flow, sometimes more powerfully than ever before, not because you have become more creative, but because creativity is no longer forced to pass through the narrow filter of identity before it can emerge. Expression becomes astonishingly direct, simple, unforced, appropriate. There is no need to manufacture authenticity because nothing artificial is being maintained. Life simply responds to itself through this body in this moment. The mind once believed that without a strong sense of self, expression would disappear. But the opposite begins to reveal itself. Expression becomes cleaner. What disappears is not movement. It is the tension surrounding movement. There's no longer a need to calculate how every action will be remembered. No need to secure a legacy. No need to ensure that each decision fits a carefully maintained identity. Each moment completes itself. It leaves almost nothing behind. This is one of the quietest yet most liberating transformations of awakening. Success is no longer gathered as evidence that you are becoming someone important. It is simply an experience that arose and passed. Failure no longer hardens into a story about who you are. It becomes information, a response from life, nothing more. Experience stops accumulating into psychological weight. The body no longer carries yesterday into today in quite the same way. The past loses its emotional gravity because there is no owner collecting it. This changes every relationship. When there is no image to defend, listening becomes effortless. You no longer need to be right in order to remain whole. You no longer need to win an argument to preserve yourself. You become available to what is actually happening instead of protecting who you believe yourself to be. Love changes in exactly the same way. Affection no longer carries possession. Care no longer carries obligation. There is intimacy without ownership, closeness without control, giving without keeping score. Leadership also becomes something entirely different. It no longer emerges from ambition or the desire to influence others. It arises naturally from coherence. People begin to trust what you say, not because you are trying to be convincing, but because nothing inside you is trying to convince them. There is no performance, no hidden agenda, no identity seeking confirmation through authority. Decisions become surprisingly responsive. Without a position to defend, changing direction is no longer experienced as failure. Listening becomes deeper because nothing inside is waiting for its turn to speak. Teaching undergoes the same transformation. There is no longer someone trying to appear wise. There is simply clarity responding to confusion. Sometimes through words, sometimes through silence, sometimes through presence alone. The teaching is no longer about expressing yourself, it becomes life expressing itself. Perhaps this is why the greatest teachers often seem so ordinary. There is very little personality left to admire, very little image left to imitate, only an unmistakable simplicity, a transparency through which life moves without resistance. This is what Chapter 7 calls fullness without ownership. Nothing has been lost, nothing has become passive, nothing has withdrawn from the world. In fact, life often becomes more vibrant, more creative, more loving, more responsive, but none of it belongs to anyone. The river does not claim the shape of the valley. The sun does not claim the warmth it gives. Life simply expresses itself. And perhaps that has always been its deepest nature. When nothing needs to be owned, everything becomes astonishingly light. There is expression without identity, action without a doer, participation without the burden of being someone who participates. Life no longer needs an author. It simply needs nothing standing in the way of its own expression. This realization can easily be misunderstood. The mind hears that there is no owner and imagines withdrawal. It imagines passivity, detachment, a life where nothing matters anymore. But that is not what happens. If anything, life becomes more intimate, more immediate, more fully lived. The body does not become less responsive. It becomes more responsive. Not because it is trying harder, but because nothing inside is interrupting the natural intelligence of the moment. Action continues. Sometimes it becomes even more decisive than before. Words continue. Often they become simpler, clearer, more honest. Love continues, but it no longer asks for reassurance before it gives itself. The difference is almost invisible from the outside. Yet internally, everything has changed. Action is no longer organized around maintaining an identity. It is organized around coherence. The body no longer scans every situation with the question, how will this make me appear? Will this strengthen who I think I am? Will others understand me? Those questions gradually lose their urgency, because there is no longer a psychological owner waiting to be confirmed. Instead, another movement quietly takes their place. Life simply responds to what is here. A conversation asks for listening, so listening happens. Someone needs help. Helping happens. A boundary needs to be expressed. The words appear. Not because a self has calculated the correct response, but because clarity naturally expresses itself when nothing is obstructing it. This is why expression begins to feel effortless. Not effortless because nothing is happening, effortless because there is no unnecessary resistance surrounding what is happening. Silence and movement become intimate partners. Silence is no longer the absence of expression. It becomes the place from which expression naturally arises. Words emerge from stillness. They return to stillness. Action unfolds from the same quiet ground. Nothing needs to be forced into existence. Nothing needs to be held back out of fear. There is an unmistakable precision to this way of living, not the precision of careful control, the precision of life responding directly to itself. The nervous system slowly begins to trust something it could never have imagined before. It discovers that participation never depended upon ownership. Movement never required a personal author. Expression never needed someone standing behind it claiming, "This is mine." For much of life, authorship felt like responsibility. It seemed necessary to carry every decision, every outcome, every relationship, as though life depended upon maintaining the one who was doing it all. But gradually, the body discovers something profoundly relieving. It can participate completely without carrying itself. Nothing is lost. Nothing becomes vague. Nothing becomes passive. In fact, presence becomes more complete because attention is no longer divided between life itself and the constant effort of maintaining an identity within it. Perhaps this is what true embodiment begins to feel like. Not becoming a better version of yourself, not expressing yourself more successfully, but becoming transparent enough that life no longer encounters the resistance of someone trying to own what was never theirs to begin with. Participation remains, expression remains, love remains, creation remains. Only the burden of ownership quietly falls away. Perhaps freedom was never meant to be the absence of action. Perhaps it was never about withdrawing from the world. Perhaps true freedom is discovering that action no longer needs an owner. For so much of life, we imagine that expression belongs to us. My words, my creativity, my achievements, my love. But perhaps life has always been expressing itself long before the mind arrived to claim it. The wind never claims the movement of the trees. The ocean never claims the shape of each wave. The river never claims the valley it patiently carves. Life simply moves, quietly, effortlessly, without announcing itself. Perhaps this body has never been asked to become someone extraordinary. Perhaps it has never been asked to build the perfect identity, leave the perfect legacy, or protect the perfect image. Perhaps it has only ever been learning one simple movement: how to become transparent enough that nothing stands between life and its own expression. Not by becoming less alive, but by becoming less divided, less defended, less occupied with ownership. Until speaking happens without someone trying to be heard. Love happens without someone needing to be loved in return. Creation happens without someone seeking recognition. Leadership happens without someone trying to become a leader. Life simply continues its quiet conversation with itself. And perhaps this is what fullness has always been: not becoming more, not possessing more, not achieving more, but discovering that nothing was ever missing. Nothing needed to be claimed. Nothing needed to belong to you before it could flow through you. Perhaps the deepest expression of awakening is not that life belongs to you, but that you finally become quiet enough to realize you have always belonged to life.